All right, good morning. How's everybody feeling today? All right, I guess it was an exciting night last night. I hope everybody enjoyed it and had some good times with some new friends. So again, my name is Nathan Lebenz. My pleasure to be the MC here on the main stage for the balance of the conference through today. And we're going to begin today's program with a discussion of artificial intelligence. If effective altruism is about anything, I think we've established over the last 48 hours that it's about asking the big questions and not shying away from potentially challenging or uncomfortable answers to those questions. There's no bigger question than what are the most transformative things that could happen to the Earth, and perhaps uncomfortably, how might that go? When we look back on history, we can certainly identify several major transformations that upended everything and changed everything, some ways for the better and also in some ways for the worse. Agriculture, writing, the printing press, the internal combustion engine, nuclear power, and the internet have all left such an incredible mark on humanity. So it's natural to think what could come next, and certainly artificial intelligence is a very likely candidate for something that could radically transform the world. So how can we reap the benefits of artificial intelligence while avoiding the risks? That's what this next hour is about. First, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Max Tegmark, a professor of physics at MIT, where he focuses on precision cosmology. Max is originally from Sweden. He earned a bachelor's degree in physics from the Royal Institute of Technology in 1990, and then he moved here to UC Berkeley, where he studied physics and earned a master's degree in 1992 and a PhD in 1994. After California, he returned to Europe as a research associate at the Max Planck Institute for Physique in Munich. And then in 1996, he became a Hubble Fellow and a member of the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. He later became an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania, where he received tenure in 2003 and ultimately moved later to MIT. He is the author of more than 200 technical papers, has been featured in dozens of science documentaries, and has received numerous awards for his research, including a Packard Fellowship, the Cottrell Scholar Award, and an NSF Career Grant. He is also a fellow at the American Physical Society, and his work with the SDSS collaboration on galaxy clustering shared the first prize in Science Magazine's Breakthrough of the Year in 2003. Please join me in welcoming, live via Blue Jeans, Professor Max Tegmark. We seem to have a little audio problem, obviously. Professor Tegmark, if you can hear me, we can't hear you just yet, so we're going to make sure we get the audio up in the room. Hold on one second. They're turning dials furiously here. Talk to us a little bit. The request is if you could take your headphones out and try that. Maybe the microphone there is the issue. I think we could hear you earlier in testing, but oh, how's that? Any better? Microphone change? We could do that. You want to go to the panel first? Are our panelists ready? All right. So we're also going to have a panel coming up momentarily with 5 distinguished guests. I will introduce them perhaps momentarily. I don't know if we're going to go direct to that or if we can get the audio fixed. But I'm definitely excited because we have people here who have worked on AI at the highest level, including at Google, at the OpenAI project, people who have thought deeply about safety for many years. One of the founders of Vicarious Systems, famously, that cracked the CAPTCHA problem in AI. And all of these people share a passion not only for advancing AI and bringing those benefits that we all dream of to reality, but also a deep concern for the safety of the project and making sure that this doesn't go deeply off the rails. As we talked about with Jan Tallinn yesterday, artificial intelligence may not, by default, be a good thing for humanity. So how do we think about bringing that technology to bear, but not putting ourselves in harm's way? Let me check with the panelists and see if they're ready. We might do a little switch here. I'll be right back. Take me off. All right, so I'm back just with a quick update. We are working on the audio situation. We think we have it isolated, if not fixed. So give us another minute. We're going to hold with the current plan. We're going to have Professor Tegmark live via Blue Jeans, and then we'll get to the panel. So give us just a minute. We'll get this figured out. We'll be right back.
Go to meeting. So from the phone. Okay. Can you hear me? Thank you so much for your patience and for this was a great example of why we have to make sure that future computer technology is more robust than what we have today. So at the Future of Life Institute, we are trying to make the world a better place. And will everybody from FLI please stand up? Our goal is to take great people, great ideas, and great resources and combine them to make an awesome future of life. And today I want to focus on an awesome future of life with artificial intelligence. And let me just ask the audio wizards there to turn off the return sound so that I can't hear the echo. Great. When we look towards the future with AI, there are incredible opportunities, obviously, because everything we love about civilization is the product of intelligence. So if we can amplify our own intelligence, the opportunities are almost boundless. At the same time, there are some interesting questions we have to answer. In the near term, should we start an arms race with AI weapons? What's going to happen to the job market? What do we want to happen with the job market? Do we want old jobs to get replaced by new jobs? Or do we want to create a flourishing society where people don't need jobs? Going farther up this tree here of possibilities, will AI ever reach the human level? And if so, will there be an intelligence explosion causing superintelligence? And if so, is that something we should welcome or fear? And what are the possibilities for after that? Questions, and more questions. And this is a wonderfully fascinating conversation, both because it involves the future we want to create for life in our universe for billions of years, and also because there are great controversies that we can argue and debate. This is how I see the main factions in the controversy. There are very respectable scientists that I think of as techno-skeptics who think that we won't reach human-level AI for at least 100 years, and therefore it's premature to worry about it too much. There's another group of AI researchers I think of as digital utopians who are quite convinced that we will reach human-level AI within the next century, but that we shouldn't worry about it too much because this is just the natural next step of the evolution of life in our cosmos, and it's pretty much guaranteed to be a good thing. And finally, there's the beneficial AI movement, which agrees that it is plausible that we'll get human-level AI within our lifetime, but that it's not guaranteed that the outcome is going to be awesome, but rather a good outcome is something we actually have to work for. Now, these are very legitimate disagreements that we should discuss and debate. But in order to do so, and you'll have a wonderful panel right after this where things like this will be hashed out and debated, it's very important to not get distracted by a lot of very common misconceptions. So to enable us to focus on the really interesting stuff, let me take the rest of this talk and just go through the top myths about AI safety that I've come across. The first one has to do with timeline, where there's a myth that somehow superintelligence by 2100 is inevitable, or that it's impossible. The fact is, there have been a lot of surveys of experts in the AI field, and the surveys all show the same thing, namely, we just don't know. Some researchers think it's going to take hundreds of years or more. Some think it's going to take decades. The take-home message is anyone who claims to know with great certainty the timeline is exaggerating. Myth number two is that only people who are Luddites actually worry about AI. The fact is that many of the most prominent researchers in AI, including Stuart Russell, who wrote the standard textbook in this subject, have expressed concerns. A related myth is that this is somehow very controversial AI safety research. But if you look at this photo here, that I took right after Elon Musk had announced his donation to AI safety research. What you should note is that Mr. Establishment on the left, the president of the AAAI here, Tobeyorg, is not punching Elon or biting Elon. He looks very happy because, in fact, he thinks this is a great thing, and so do the vast majority of AI researchers. Then there are some myths about what the concerns really are. That the worry would somehow be AI is turning conscious or turning evil. In fact, if you are feeling threatened by a machine, it's completely irrelevant to you whether the machine has some subjective experience and feels conscious or not. What matters if a heat-seeking missile is chasing you is simply its behavior and not how it feels, and whether its goals are actually aligned with your goals. And that's related to this other worry about AI somehow turning evil, which is completely silly and, of course, inspired by some bad Hollywood movies. The concern is not malice, it's competence. Why are ants correctly a little bit concerned about you? Not because you're an evil ant hater who goes out of your way to step on ants on the sidewalk on Bancroft Avenue if you can, most likely, but simply because you are more competent than the ants and your goals might not be aligned with the ants. So, for example, if you're in charge of this awesome green energy project and just as you're going to switch the water on to flood the area, you discover there's an anthill in the middle. Tough luck for the ants. So we want to make sure that we create AI whose goals are aligned with ours so we don't end up in the position of those ants. Are you able to hear me well now? Good. Another myth is that robots are somehow the main concern, which very much irritates roboticists, of course. Robots are a relatively old technology. It's intelligence itself, which is a new thing, and which is really the crucial thing here. If a super intelligence is way, way smarter than us, it doesn't need a robotic body as long as it has an internet connection to outsmart us on financial markets and hire people to do all its bidding, even if there were no robots. It's the intelligence that matters. Yet another myth is that AI somehow cannot control humans. But of course, the fact is that intelligence really enables control. We control tigers not by having sharper claws or bigger muscles, but by being smarter than them and thereby developing technology to control them. And AI can certainly do the same, so we're smart enough. Which is related to another really fun myth, which is machines cannot have goals. Now, if you're feeling threatened by a machine, it's because it's exhibiting some sort of goal-oriented behavior, perhaps. And you don't care, again, about the other philosophical aspects of it, as long as it's acting like it has a goal. So if you're chased by a heat-seeking missile, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm not worried because machines don't have goals. And even if you programmed a machine to not have goals that seem harmful, but to do something completely different, it's been pointed out by Steve Omohundro, Nick Bostrom, Stuart Russell, and others, that this machine might nonetheless develop sub-goals which are not aligned with yours. I made up the silly video game to explain this here. The goal of your little blue robot here in the middle is to save the sheep on the right from the evil wolf and bring them into safety in the yellow room. And even though his only goal is to save as many sheep as possible, he will develop a sub-goal of self-preservation, not dying, because if he runs into the bomb, then he's not going to save any more sheep. He's also going to develop a sub-goal of improving his world model, because that way he can find a shorter trajectory for the sheep. He's also going to try to understand technology better and acquire resources, because if he picks up this potion in the corked bottle there, he can run twice as fast and save more sheep, which was his goal. And if he picks up the gun, he can shoot the wolf and save all the sheep. So I'm summarizing that in this little triangle here. If you give a machine almost any goal that's sufficiently ambitious, it's likely to develop sub-goals. of having better hardware, self-preservation, getting more resources, understanding the world better, and so on. And you better make sure that those sub-goals are also aligned with what we actually want. Last but not least, there's this myth that people who are concerned about AI safety think that superintelligence is just years away, when of course most of the people who've gone on record being concerned think it's going to take way, way longer than that, but are simply saying that it might take decades to figure out how to make this beneficial and safe. So let's not start the AI safety research the night before some dudes on Red Bull decide to switch it on, but rather plan ahead. I've posted this little myth sheet with all the explanations on the link you see here, on the Future of Life website, also in the AI section sidebar. Finally, plan ahead, I say. So what can we do to plan ahead? We have all these questions that we want to answer, and we want to answer them through research. So we launched, with the help of Elon Musk and the Open Philanthropy Project, a worldwide competition for ideas for research. We were extremely excited to get about 300 applications asking for about $100 million, which is way more than the 7 million we had to give out at that time. The 37 winners who've got this have been working on this now for almost a year, and it's super exciting. We were just looking at the annual reports to see all the cool work that's already come out of this. And Washington Post even said that they feel that last year was the year when AI safety went mainstream. And this sort of research, we hope, is just the beginning of a really awesome worldwide effective altruism effort to help create beneficial AI. So I want to just end by saying that effective altruism helped mainstream the beneficial AI movement and can really do wonders moving it forward in the future. Though I've listed a whole bunch of organizations here in the EA movement who are trying to do exactly this. And let's work together and let's make a difference and create an awesome future of life. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Professor Tegmark. Apologies for the technical difficulties getting you up and running here. Can you hear me okay right now? We seem to have, I can hear me, I can't hear you, but you seem to be able to hear me. Talk to me one more time.
Did you at least hear my talk?
Okay, yes. We could hear you until just a second ago. Now you're back. So I wanted to ask just a couple of follow-up questions. You spent most of your talk dispelling myths and giving facts. I think for an audience of effective altruists who really want to understand these issues and understand what the situation is, what the stakes are, what the reality is, that's extremely important. Do you think that the audience in the room right now should go forward and spread these same myths and facts to people who are just in the more general public, undergraduates in the sciences, the kind of next generation of people who might work on these issues? Or are you more focused on the current research community and the current effective altruist community that surrounds the issues today?
I think both of these are really important and valuable. The sooner we all together can help clear up these myths, the sooner we're going to challenge all the talent and energy and resources out there to focusing on constructively dealing with these questions, rather than quibbling about misunderstanding. So I think it'll be wonderful if people here can share the facts about these myths widely. I also think that this is a conversation that not only the AI community needs to be having, because yes, some of the questions are very nerdy and geeky and technical, but some of the questions go far beyond computer science research. They go into economics, all the issues of what sort of labor market we want, what sort of future we want to create. It goes into psychology and philosophy. How do you, if you can create a leisure society where nobody has a job, technically, how do you ensure that people can find fulfillment and meaning that's not a question only for AI researchers, and most broadly involved. Ultimately, of course, we should all be asking ourselves what kind of future we want to create, because it's our future.
Indeed. Questions of values as much as questions of technical feasibility or technical concerns. So turning to those grants that you mentioned for a moment, obviously there were a lot of grant winners that are now putting their projects forward, pushing their projects forward. Are there any in particular that you'd like to share with us that you think are most exciting or most high potential in terms of making sure that AI does remain safe as it develops?
There are very many I was excited about when looking at all these annual reports. Actually, one area I find interesting of many is the question of value alignment. I alluded to it briefly in my talk when I said that we need to ensure that if we have entities more powerful than us, that their goals are aligned with ours. And that's something which, even if you can solve the more philosophical and ethical questions about what value we want, also involve really daunting technical challenges. And for example, NERI here at Berkeley and many of the other organizations I mentioned are working hard on it together now with a bunch of professors and their groups at other universities around the world. I feel that there's a lot of progress being made there, which makes me more optimistic that if we work really hard on this, we can actually solve this.
Perfect. So just one more question. We've got just a minute left, but how can people help besides relaying your message of myths and facts? What else can people do to help you and the Future of Life Institute to advance your mission?
Oh, thank you for asking. Everybody, all of you in the audience can help by doing exactly the same thing that I'm doing right now, namely volunteering for the effective altruism movement. I am a volunteer for the Future of Life Institute, and the vast majority of all the work I described was done by volunteers. So we would love it to have you as a volunteer. You can volunteer for us by going to futureoflife.org and filling in our spreadsheet, or flagging down one of the people who stood up at the beginning of my talk and saying you want to volunteer. Or you can volunteer for any of the other organizations that are represented there at EA Global, because that's how this stuff gets done. There is no shortage of great ideas to be developed, and you can be the one who actually does the work.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. Professor Max Tegmark, thank you very much. All right, so that brings us to our panel, and it's my pleasure to introduce first our moderator for the panel, Reva Tez. She is a co-founder and partner at Permutation Ventures, a database platform and investment fund that focuses on impact-driven early-stage AI companies. Previously, Reva founded Berlin Singularity, a group promoting discussions on emerging technology in mainland Europe. Through Berlin Singularity, she helped the early-stage biotech companies in the area with business development by connecting them to seed and growth capital. She began her career as an entrepreneur at the age of 18 when she established a retail business in London, which is still open for business to this day. She has held teaching positions at the DAB and HTW business schools in Germany and has guest lectured at Oxford, Birkbeck, and Stanford. Reva writes for a number of publications on topics such as artificial intelligence, finance, and philosophy, and has represented machine learning in a 2016 Microsoft campaign for The Economist. Please join me in welcoming Reva Tez. Next up, Dario Amadei. Dario is a research scientist at OpenAI and co-author of the recent paper, Concrete Problems in AI Safety, which outlines a pragmatic and empirical approach to making AI systems safe. Previously, he worked at Google, where he was a deep learning researcher on the Google Brain team, and also at Baidu. Dario also helped to lead the project that developed Deep Speech 2, which was named one of 10 breakthrough technologies of 2016 by the MIT Technology Review. He holds a PhD in physics from Princeton, where he was awarded the Hertz Foundation Doctoral Thesis Prize. He is also a scientific advisor to GiveWell and Good Ventures, where he has helped build the research staff, provided basic training in biology, physics, and AI to senior staff, and represented the organizations in conversations with major science funders and philanthropists. Welcome, Dario. Dileep George is next. He is a co-founder of Vicarious Systems, an AI startup backed by the founders of PayPal, Palantir, and Facebook. Previously, he was co-founder and CTO of Numenta and a research fellow at the Redwood Neuroscience Institute. Dileep has authored 22 patents and many influential papers on the mathematics of brain circuits. His research has been featured in the New York Times, Business Week, Scientific Computing, Wired, and several peer-reviewed academic journals. He earned his master's and PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford and his bachelor's from IIT in Bombay. Please welcome Dileep George. Tobeyorg, you've heard from before. He is a moral philosopher at Oxford University. His work focuses on the biggest questions facing humanity. What are the most important issues of our time, and how can we best address them? His earlier work explored the ethics of global health and global poverty, demonstrating that aid has been highly successful on average and has the potential to be even more successful if we were to improve our priority setting. This led him to create an international society called Giving What We Can, whose members have pledged over $700 million to the most effective charities helping improve the world. He also co-founded the wider effective altruism movement, encouraging thousands of people to use reason and evidence to help others as much as possible. His current research is on avoiding the threat of human extinction and thus safeguarding a positive future for humanity, which he considers to be among the most pressing and neglected issues we face today. Tobeyorg. And finally, for our AI panel, Daniel Dewey. He leads the Open Philanthropy Project's work on supporting technical research to mitigate potential risks from advanced artificial intelligence. Daniel graduated from Carnegie Mellon University in 2008 with a BS in computer science and philosophy. He then worked at Google and the Future of Humanity Institute, contracted with the Future of Life Institute and the Center for Effective Altruism, and joined the Open Philanthropy Project in 2015. Please welcome Daniel Dewey. You guys are in for a treat. Reva, take it away.
Hi. Okay, so it's been a pretty big year for AI. I think that's an understatement. And we're lucky to have some really great people from the community here on this panel. A lot of interest in kind of AI safety blown up in the last year. More of a focus of it. A lot of us were at the big AI conferences in the last year, and workshops focused around AI safety. And another big development was the release of OpenAI, and a lot of focus kind of from people in the community stepping up and saying, "Hey, let's think about the risks around this development and progress in AI as well as the benefits," which I think is the focus of our panel today. So we've all had really embarrassingly long intros, so I don't even know where mine came from. But maybe instead, everyone on the panel can kind of take it in turns to say their focus of expertise, what they're working on, what they're excited by. Dario.
Sure. So I kind of originally became interested in the AI safety issue from the perspective of a developer of AI, and kind of seeing the way that AI systems, particularly deep neural nets, can often behave in very opaque and unpredictable ways, and seeing how as systems become more powerful, this could lead to very, very unpredictable behavior. So, as mentioned in the introduction, I recently wrote this paper called Concrete Problems in AI Safety that tries to explore AI safety in current and future machine learning systems from perspective of kind of machine learning and empirical work. So I just recently joined OpenAI, and I'm working on a combination of safety work and AI research that I think is closely related to safety work.
We are working on artificial general intelligence. All the advances that we have seen in the AI field are actually from narrow AI. And there are a handful of companies working on developing AGI, artificial general intelligence, and we are one of them. And we look at how the human brain works, and we try to embody those principles in the computer using machine learning and graphical models as the framework.
13 years ago, I met Nick Bostrom at Oxford when we both just arrived there, and he made me really interested in existential risk and these questions about how can we make sure that we have a really positive long-term future for humanity. He, back then, and still thinks that anthropogenic risks are more likely than natural risks, and that AI is one of the most plausible of those. And so I've been looking at this for a long time in my work at FHI, and I'm particularly interested in questions about safety strategy. So I also follow the research on technical AI safety, but my expertise is more in thinking about these strategic questions, like how should we think about timelines, how should we, what is it important for us to be doing now at this early stage compared to, what's our comparative advantage by being so early in this process compared to what should we leave to people, in 10 years' time or something like that.
I became interested in existential and global catastrophic risks from AI when I was working at Google. There was a discussion group on the future of AI and a lot of really interesting people there. I hadn't really heard about that before, and it sort of caught my attention. Then I went and worked at Future of Humanity Institute with Nick Bostrom and with Toby and Nick Beckstead, who's now a colleague of mine at the Open Philanthropy Project. I guess the only thing I really have to add to what Toby said was that it seems clear from an effective altruist perspective that AI has a lot of potential to radically improve the human condition, but that there is sort of this necessary condition that we not have existential or global catastrophic events in the meantime. So my main focus right now is outreach to the AI and machine learning academic communities to try to find opportunities for research that we think could improve the long-term expected impact of AI.
Okay, cool. So I know that naturally the AI community is adverse a bit to talking about timelines, but we're going to go there. So I guess the first question is for the panel, and I'm going to start maybe with Dan and Toby, because you guys are looking at it from a more theoretical perspective sometimes. Like over the next few decades, how do you guys envisage AI impacting human welfare? Do you think it's going to come from the kind of technologies that we're already seeing today, or will there be radical paradigm shifts in research? And I don't know, just like a little bit of foresight into that space. Maybe Toby first.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my specialty is not so much on the earlier stage things that it's going to influence. I mean, there's lots of really interesting questions and really important questions in terms of the near-term issues, for example, around privacy and also discrimination in AI systems, lack of transparency, and these kind of concerns after that about employment, for example, which I think is a very interesting and important topic. My main interest in terms of timelines has been on when would we have really transformative artificial intelligence systems that could do, for example, let's say 80% of the jobs that humans currently do, just to be a kind of operationalization of what we mean there. So if you had this really transformative AI which could really reshape society, when would that happen? And I think a couple of things I'd say about that are that often you get people who try to predict this, and they try to say a particular number, so 30 years in the future or something like that. Really, we have a lot of uncertainty about this, and it's best to think in terms of a probability distribution over the future as to when this type of thing is going to happen, particularly as the event itself is a little bit vague. And I think that you basically strategize incorrectly if you're just thinking of a point estimate. And instead, I think that there's like a serious chance that this might happen with some, if the current very rapid progress over the last few years, were to continue, then maybe this would happen, between 10 and 20 years from now. I wouldn't think that that's more likely than not, but I think that it's quite plausible, and that the right way to think about this involves a kind of portfolio of strategies involving some hedging against this general AI coming really soon, in which case we need techniques that can be ready really quickly, and also thinking about what if it comes quite a bit later, in which case our comparative advantage now is getting a whole lot of other researchers interested in these topics and having thousands of people working on this instead of dozens of people. So you kind of get different strategies based on when it would come, and we ultimately need to pursue all of these approaches to some level.
Yeah, I have a really similar view. In particular, the idea of thinking about taking a distribution instead of a point estimate is really important to the work that I'm doing with Open Philanthropy Project right now. We came in and sort of felt like we started getting this idea that maybe there's a 1 in 10 chance or something like that over the next 20 years of this kind of really transformative AI capability. And that seemed, honestly to us, that seemed kind of insane at first. But we went and talked to a lot of AI and machine learning professors and researchers in industry. And there are like good reasons to think that it really might not happen. Like unsupervised learning is this huge, like, it's not even right to call it an unsolved problem. It's like a huge portfolio of unsolved problems. But it just may be the case that we're able to find quicker solutions to the problems that remain unsolved than most people expect. So there's this non-negligible chance that we'll have to deal with really transformative capabilities surprisingly soon.
So I think one thing that will happen to enable AGI is the combining of systems neuroscience insights with machine learning insights. Most of the advances that are happening now is based on algorithms that we discovered about 20 or 25 years ago, basically neural networks and backpropagation. And the advances came really from a lot more computation and a lot more data. All evidence is suggesting currently that you cannot just scale that up with more data and more computation to get to human-level AI. The characteristics of human intelligence are very different from the characteristics that are exhibited by the existing deep learning algorithms. So I think there will be a substantial change in future systems, and that will come from combining insights from neuroscience with machine learning insights.
Dileep's considering that I'm allowed to be a pedantic and annoying moderator. Do we get a timeline from you? When do we see a vicarious AI?
So the problem is that I'm
name.
not a passive observer in this one. I'm actively trying to make it happen. So I hope that it is sooner than later.
Okay. Dario, working with OpenAI, amazing stuff coming out from there, the reinforcement learning gym, advancing an entire field of research. Do you kind of agree with the panel around timelines, and is there going to be a paradigm shift or from current research just developing on?
Sure. So a couple things. I think on one hand, my perspective on kind of long-term timelines is that it's pretty hard to predict the future of what's going to happen in a few decades. So I basically agree with this kind of having wide estimates, right? Something very transformative could happen, in 20 years in our lifetimes, or it might not happen at all. But what I, as a researcher, am able to see somewhat more clearly, though definitely not that clearly, is what might happen in the next 5 or 10 years. And I think even the set of things that can happen in the next 5 or 10 years should give us substantial pause about the impacts of this technology, both over that time scale and then as capabilities continue to improve. So most of what we've done so far, as Dileep was talking about, is based on unsupervised learning. So I think two things that are going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years is, number one, all the things we've done in supervised learning, which includes very good speech systems, very good image recognition systems, NLP systems that I would say are okay, but are still all in a research form and have been deployed in limited ways. But I think full deployment of these technologies will, if the interface to computers changed from typing to speech, I think that would have a very big impact on the world. And similarly with vision and other things, there are hundreds of applications we can think of that are going to be present in 5 or 10 years that aren't present now. And then I think the second strand is that we're starting to think about reinforcement learning and even unsupervised learning. And I think reinforcement learning, because it deals with systems that interact in a much more intertwined way in the world, will see much wider application in the physical world, and will also offer much more opportunity for something to go wrong. A system that's autonomous, that makes decisions on its own, like a robot or a self-driving car, or something like this has much more potential to do something that its designers didn't intend. So I think even over this time scale, I think there's going to be a lot of progress. And as Reva mentioned, we at OpenAI are working on very actively on reinforcement learning and unsupervised learning. And I mean, I'm biased, but I'm certainly very excited about our work. And I think that even within a few years, that enormous progress will happen.
Okay, going back to Dileep. So Vicarious's AGI is here sooner rather than later. How can you imagine the world post that? Like, what kind of changes can you see in employment, welfare, economics? Like, what does society look like in a post-AGI world?
Well, I will go back to one of Arthur Clarke's earlier statements where, we want to invent technology so that, we can, the goal of the future is full unemployment so that we can all play. So imagine, all the work is automated, that we don't have to work for a living. And all the things that that are tedious are automated. And wealth creation just happens automatically. Then I think the world can be very different. And you can solve a lot of the problems that we struggle with today. So I do think, so if you look at the history of humanity, we used to spend all our time hunting for food, or a large fraction of our time were spent in just getting food or just making a living. And then now, a lot more of our time is spent on consuming information, consuming entertainment, having discussions about ideas, etc. So I think we will have more such opportunities if more work is automated. And more people will be able to participate in those activities if more work is automated, provided that we are able to share the fruits of that work in an equitable way.
Communism. No, just joking. Okay, so Dan and Toby, maybe you want to present something on the flip side, like maybe looking at how other technologies in the past and optimism around that, historical examples. Or...
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what are analogous technologies, it's quite unclear. I mean, I think that if you look at humanity, and as a species, the reason that we're in the commanding position we are over the world, where in the midst of the moment of causing effectively a mass extinction event of other species in the way that we're transforming the world to our purposes, that's not because we're stronger than other species or faster or something like that. Pretty much the only thing in which we're unique is that we're the smartest. So developing some new technology which is smarter than us would dethrone us from our only advantage over the other species. It's quite unclear that sounds very big, and like it could be very transformative and difficult to manage. We would need to align the values of these systems with ours, or otherwise control them or something. Otherwise, they would be controlling us. So it's a really big thing, and it feels to me that it could be bigger than the Industrial Revolution or even kind of the agricultural revolution. Could be perhaps the biggest thing to happen since the development of intelligence in the first place on Earth or something. At least it's plausible. Perhaps this model is just wrong, and it's not going to be that big a deal. Maybe for various reasons that the cap on how smart it can be just isn't that much higher than us or something. But I think it's probably a really big deal.
It also has this unusual potential property of, and we're not really sure how development is going to play out, but it seems like there's a reasonable chance that there could be really big power differentials, like that the capabilities of one group or one AI system or one country could speed dramatically ahead. And in the past, we've seen that play out over 100-year periods or something, where some technology is adopted in some particular country or region, but we could see that on a much shorter time scale if it turns out that AI progresses really rapidly, or that progress in a few areas lets us make systems that are practically more effective across a wide variety of domains. So I think that's something where you can look at history for analogs, but where there are going to be these quantitative or qualitative differences in how quickly things play out and what kinds of effects that has.
I mean, I would advise people, if you're interested in those kinds of things, look at AI Impacts. It's a fantastic website that tries to actually just gather together all of the kind of indubitable empirical relevant information. So it's not just speculation, but it's a kind of list of all of the factual relevant information. For example, there's a big study into how many times has there been discontinuous technological change in human history, looking at the most prominent examples that people mention, like the Haber process or atomic weapons, and trying to see whether they really were discontinuous. And I mean, in that particular case, it looked like there isn't much evidence of really other discontinuous changes, which perhaps suggests that this one won't be either. But they don't put too much weight on that, but they at least try to just present the evidence to you. It's a really good place to try to look at those historical analogs.
Cool. And kind of moving away from the theoretical, looking a bit more about the landscape right now, posing to the panel some examples of people or projects that are using AI towards a greater impact. I really like the reinforcement learning gym that came out of OpenAI because it took something that was normally an IP, an intellectual property locked to a technical group and gave it out to the community to be able to build and develop their own research, which I thought was really cool. Some other examples, Dario, is there anything else that's coming out of OpenAI that you can announce?
So, I mean, do you mean this in terms of ideas for making AI more safe, or ideas for AI kind of influencing the world in a good way?
I guess broad.
Sure. So there are two projects actually, because I mean I've been kind of thinking about safety a lot. So there are kind of two projects that are in my mind that I think have been really useful. So one is by Chris Olah, who was my co-author on the concrete problems paper. But long before that came out, he did something called Deep Dream, which many of you probably know because it kind of generated these kind of warped neural net generated images that everyone has seen on our Facebook profile. But what ultimately motivated that research for him was a desire to see inside what was going on in neural nets, because they tend to be so opaque, and to give them some transparency. And so there were examples where what he was trying to do with the Deep Dream stuff was to look at some class that's generated by a neural net, like the class of images that are labeled as having a barbell. And he would find things like that every barbell that was generated by the neural net would have a hand attached to it, because every barbell that it had seen in the training set had its hand attached to it. So you could imagine that this is a kind of spurious correlation that if you ended up using it in a system that acted in the world, could do something very unpredictable. And so Chris's work has really helped to elucidate that this is a problem, and he did a lot of work on kind of helping to solve the problem. So I think just having a little bit of curiosity of trying to understand our own technologies and what's going on inside them can go very far towards making the systems more safe. And then as a side effect, it ends up generating something incredibly cool that ordinary people who have never heard of AI kind of see in their Facebook feed.
That's cool. Dileep, any other AI projects that you find interesting, or applications in different industries that you think have good impact?
Well, so we do find all the work that is happening, all the excitement that is happening in AI is very interesting. And obviously, we are biased towards our own work, and some of it is going to start coming out in a couple of months as papers and demos. So what I can tell you, what we are doing differently, or trying to do differently, is that one is our approach is more model-based. To give an example of what model-based means, I can give by analogy. So you can think of evolution, and there were other animals that exhibited very complex behavior in this world. Dinosaurs are one example. They were able to navigate the world, hunt, eat, do all kinds of complex behavior, but we don't consider them as intelligent in the way humans are intelligent. Why? Because most of their systems were reactive. So you can have intelligent-looking behavior produced by systems that are reactive. Just stimulus comes in, and there is a pre-programmed or predetermined response. And you can train this reactive systems using a number of mechanisms. You can use evolutionary algorithms like evolution did, or you can use backpropagation or reinforcement learning or any such system to create reacting systems which look look like they're doing intelligent behavior, but are actually pretty brittle under the hood. So if you look at the Atari game system or something, it is very impressive behavior, but if you change the color of the game, or if you change the sprites, it will break. And the reason is that it has mapped a set of patterns to a behavior without having a good model of what is happening. It doesn't think about, oh, here is a paddle, here is a ball, this is how I want to move the paddle to hit the ball. It's more, oh, if I see this pattern, do this. So that is something that we are trying to, and it is harder in many ways, and it's not like this is a new idea. This has been around for a long time, but that part is harder to do compared to reactive systems. So it's interesting because we are pretty much going to the same analogy as nature did. First, we are creating intelligence using more reactive systems kind of mechanisms, model-free mechanisms, and gradually people are going towards more unsupervised learning and model-based systems.
Yeah, Daniel and Toby, any comments on impactful use cases of AI that you guys find exciting or interesting?
Yeah, honestly, I focus mostly on the global catastrophic risk side. I sort of am trusting people who are developing AI systems to be catching, like, there are a ton of good uses in healthcare. I'm really excited about self-driving cars. I don't want people to be dying in car accidents every year. On the AI safety side, I'm very excited both about Google's support of the concrete AI safety paper. Like, I think that's just a really big step in the history of the field. And then I'm particularly bullish on some work that was sort of started by Paul Cristiano on systems that are guided more by short-term heuristics than pointed at long-term goals. It seems like an interesting approach that might dissolve some of the thornier AI safety problems. But I won't go deep into the details right now. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I was excited by Chris Ola's work as well. I thought that was really fantastic. Just as interestingly as just AI machine learning work, and also as AI safety related work, I mean, he had these really good techniques, as well as the things that you mentioned. There's also this case that to find out what a particular neuron's doing, how do you transform the image in a particular way, preserving certain kind of global properties, such that that neuron kind of like has a higher activation in order to find out what the neuron does. And a whole lot of stuff. I mean, there's some really interesting stuff with that whole project with the deep dream things. The pictures, in some sense, are the least interesting aspect. But it was really good work on the transparency. And I think that also the work that Laurent Orso of DeepMind and Stuart Armstrong of FHI did on interruptibility is very nice. That's about, in a kind of standard reinforcement learning framework, continuous with current AI techniques, how could you make it so that an agent doesn't resist being turned off, to avoid it having an instrumental goal to avoid being turned off, because it can't achieve its goals better if the human turns it off. You could get, even if it doesn't have an intrinsic desire to have self-preservation, you could get this instrumental desire just very naturally. So they did some work on that. They haven't solved the problem, but they've like made a very good first step on it. And what really excited me about those things, and also your whole research agenda, and also the Miri's recent research agenda, is that they're interfacing with actually the practice in the field. And I think that's really important for a couple of reasons. I think that if AI comes soon, that it's really important that we have techniques for managing it which interface with the technologies that are going to be the ones that actually produced it. It would take too long, in some sense, to come up with totally new things that don't really interact. And I also think that if AI comes late, that the most important thing for us to do is to develop a much bigger community of researchers. And I think that the way to do that is to create kind of shovel-ready projects that they can do that kind of interface with current work. And so either way, it actually seems like a great approach.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with this more strongly. I think that it's not that I'm kind of against theoretical sky's the limit work on thinking about how to make very strong AI systems safe. But I think something that's very easy to underestimate is just the value of an empirical feedback loop. So if I'm worried about some particular issue, it's an advantage to the research if I'm able to test where that issue is present in some machine learning system where a lot of other things are going on that could either, maybe the thing isn't really an issue, or maybe it's much more severe than I think it is, and all the methods that I've come up with that I think could solve it won't solve it. And I think the way to get that empirical feedback loop is to tie it in, and that was kind of the point of our paper, and I think also Laurent and Stuart's work and the recent MIRI agenda are kind of all going in that direction. I think that's a really good direction that's to be welcomed.
Yeah, another thing to add to that, I think, was earlier this year, DeepMind making their announcement about partnering with the NHS, working on projects for the healthcare system in the UK, which I thought was very interesting as an application.
Yeah, I mean, that's a case where they've got, the current setup doesn't use machine learning, so it's like not currently a thing that does machine learning to help, but it obviously would create a point at which if there was kind of provable, if machine learning was clearly working better than the existing algorithms, that it could be kind of put in potentially in the future and so on. And healthcare is a very natural place, particularly things like medical imaging, and there's a lot of people looking into that in lots of different companies trying to come up with some good solutions.
I think there's enormous potential. I mean, it's somewhat off in a different direction from kind of the fundamental research, but I think there's enormous potential for machine learning to revolutionize medicine and healthcare. And right now, I think we're temporarily being held up by kind of logistics, data collection. Often biological data is very, very difficult to get. There's a lot of issues of kind of patient consent and just the way the data is stored and privacy and that sort of stuff. But I feel like once we get data sets that are large enough that we can collect in an ethical way to do some analysis on, then I think wonderful things are going to happen in this field.
There's been a lot of also hype in AI over the last year. I think I saw a great tweet on Twitter the other day that said, "Don't know why it's called deep learning hype and not back propaganda," which I thought was great. But I guess, we're working on the investment side, so we're seeing a lot of companies pitching us. And I was telling you guys just on the side of the stage earlier about how we had a company pitch us saying that they'd solved NLP, and as a non-technical team, so it was very amusing for us.
We solved it a few years ago.
Oh, sorry, Vicarious has already solved it. Can we quote that somewhere? If you're trying to understand like hype and being pragmatic and also AI safety, theoretical research, like the whole overview, one of the things that's kind of like the basis of that is incentive structures, like incentive structures in science. OpenAI set up as a non-profit. DeepMind have their own market incentive structures by now being acquired by Google. And I kind of want to put it maybe to Toby and Dan first about what kind of incentive structures or issues do we have around kind of like promoting the safe advancement of AI? Is it like an academic problem? Is it something that's going to, needs to be handled by nonprofits? Like, what would you like to see more of in this space in terms of incentives? Sorry, tough question, by the way.
Is that to me?
Oh, I was putting it to those guys first.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question, and it's something that I'm still like struggling with a lot. But an interesting experience I had was going and talking to a lot of AI and machine learning professors and industry researchers. Like we went and had in-person meetings with like 35 of them when we were getting into this area. And a response that we got a lot was, well, I'm personally really interested in working on the long-term impacts that AI could have and like working on some of the risks, working on some of the like more blue sky beneficial things that could happen. But I think if I told my colleagues, they would disown me. Like that many people felt isolated or felt like they couldn't talk about these things in their professional capacity. They had to wait until they went to the bar after work to talk about it. So I think that finding some sort of incremental ways to solve this common knowledge problem, that this is an area that AI researchers are the most informed and most able to talk sensibly about. And there are these natural problems where no field wants to point at itself as having potential risks, even though, all of the kinds of research and work that we do have some kinds of risks or potential for negative impacts. I don't know how to solve that part of the problem, honestly. Like, I've been really impressed by AI researchers in individual one-on-one conversations with their like frankness and ability to see to hold a few different potential situations in their heads to say, like, it could go this way, it could go this way, we don't really know yet. But getting that kind of discourse when you have more than one person in a room seems like pretty hard.
Yeah, it's also, there's a tricky aspect that, I mean, if you hear what I've been saying so far, I sound fairly negative on this. But I think it's more likely than not that AI will directly contribute to a glorious future for humanity, and that we'll have a very good outcome, and that the outcome will be very good in part, quite large part, because of AI, and we wouldn't have been able to be as good without AI. So that might make me sound very bullish on it, but while I think there's more than 50% chance that we end up in that situation, that's partly because we will do a whole lot of work in order to deal with these threats and work out how to manage them as best we can. And I think that is a bit of a disconnect, that a lot of people kind of forget that you can be pretty sure it's going to lead to a whole lot of really good outcomes, while still it could be really important to hedge against the bad outcomes and to actually start conversations about that. Regarding incentives and so forth, it's quite interesting. There's a bit of conversation about this at the moment. OpenAI talking about the questions about structures and so on. They're a non-profit. I think that ultimately this technology, both empirically, can't be owned by a company. If we got all the way to this level, there's no kind of historical analogues of a company owning something like the Industrial Revolution or even a country kind of owning that. There's kind of some brief period where some people get rich and maybe some country can get powerful, but I don't think that it could own it, and I don't think it should own it. But there's a question about what should own it. Should it be a non-profit? Well, anyone can kind of start a non-profit and just run it with an iron fist. It just means that you don't make profit. So that's not sufficient. Maybe it's necessary, but one needs kind of more questions about governance structure and so forth while you're doing that. And then there's ultimately some question about what the end point is. How is this technology eventually distributed more widely than just this, some kind of foundation or some kind of intergovernmental organization or something? So there's a whole lot of really interesting questions there. At FHI, we're starting to look into those a bit.
So one thought I have about the AI safety discussion is that I think some of it can depend on the approach being taken to solve AI. So for example, for us, solving the AI safety problem is inherent part of solving the AI problem itself. Because in many of the discussions about AI safety, it is about the AI misunderstanding our specification, which is basically saying AI doesn't have common sense. So if I tell you that I'm going to hit the road after this panel, you guys understand that I'm not going to, I'm just going to drive back home. I'm not going to take a stick and hit the road. But an AI system can misunderstand it. And the reason is that is it an AI safety problem, or we haven't solved the problem well? In this case, it is because we haven't solved the problem well. So in many approaches, solving that common sense problem is part of the problem of solving AI itself. So in that sense, the AI safety problem gets wrapped into solving AI. So that could be one reason there can be miscommunication. And more communication can help, I think.
Yeah, I think I was at DEF CON for the last 2 days, just like the opposite of this panel. But it kind of it shocked me how vulnerable just even systems that we have now, like monitors, learn how to hack pixels on monitors to change things. And like just even seeing that as a sight from someone who thinks about computers, then think about like AI and algorithms and machine learning was like a very shocking experience for me. I'm trying to see like short-term risks and there. But yeah, so effective altruism, lots of people who are thinking about, what do I do to make a lot of impact in my life? How do I do the most good? What do you guys think? Any advice on how to be part of progressing AI safely? What kind of technical skills are needed? What does the community need more of? And also maybe like non-technical ways as well.
So I think there's there's an opportunity for both at actually all the places that I've recently worked at, both Google and and certainly OpenAI. We can kind of never get enough good people. On the technical side, if you want to work on AI or the safety aspects of AI, I think the most important thing is to have as strong as possible a background in machine learning. But one role that Google was hiring for, DeepMind is hiring for, and we at OpenAI are very much hiring for is the role of machine learning research engineer. So these are people who collaborate with the research scientists to help implement and scale up AI ideas. And also, if we work on safety, then when those things are implemented and scaled up, we'll be involved in that as well. So the skills there are kind of a mix of being a very good software engineer who's able to scale things up and someone who knows enough machine learning research to collaborate with the researchers to implement ideas. And I think this is a skill that's kind of very much in demand, and we can kind of never get enough of them, and they're a huge multiplier in the productivity of the researchers. So on the technical side, I think that's that is really a really high leverage point. On the non-technical side, again, I think all of these organizations have hired or are hiring policy people, PR people to talk to the government and other organizations in a technically informed way about how should the government think about regulating AI? How should we think about risks from AI? How should we talk to the public about these issues? One of the great experiences I had was in working on the concrete problems paper, because it was a paper that was of such kind of general interest to the community. The PR and public policy apparatus of Google, talked to us about the paper, and we talked to them about how to present it in a way so the public would understand what we were saying and that we didn't get kind of sensationalist headlines. And I really came to appreciate, how much public policy and public relations people can do to really, make something have a positive impact, to make sure that the public understands it in the right way. And that this was a piece of Google or any organization that I'd never seen before. And I feel like that sort of person can really have huge leverage that's often unappreciated by technical people, but is really essential to what we do.
Yeah, Dileep, are you hiring?
Yes, we are hiring, and I didn't know that we are allowed to make job advertisements.
No.
Yeah, we are hiring, and we look for people with a good background in graphical models and machine learning in general. And if you are curious about how the brain works, that is a big, huge bonus. Yeah.
Guys?
Yeah, so there are, as we just heard, there are jobs for software engineers generally, even if without ML background in research engineering. There are also jobs for people with ML experience, obviously, at these companies, including that's quite one way to get into doing technical safety, because there isn't really a field of technical safety yet. There's also technical safety work that can be done at places like FHI in academia at Oxford, and also work on safety strategy at FHI. And also work on technical safety at DeepMind, for example. I know that they're hiring on that, and there's probably at OpenAI, if not now, then soon, and a lot of interest in these areas. And I encourage anyone who's interested in finding a position somehow to help out with these things to come up and talk to us afterwards when we're over at the room with the coffee and posters.
Yeah, I want to reiterate the technology policy thing. Being from a technical background, I didn't realize that, if you're in technology policy, you could work for government, you could work at think tanks, academia, but you could also work at big companies. I mean, Google and DeepMind and OpenAI are all going to be having policy people who are making sure that their work fits into the broader landscape well. But another thing that I think the effective altruism community can sometimes overlook are roles that aren't specific to these particular areas, but roles that any company would want to hire. So the thing that enables me to do my work right now at OpenPhil is we have someone who's really extremely good at human resources. We have people who are really extremely good at the legal side of grant logistics and who do complex and satisfying and challenging work. But that's not not what you first think of because it's not the most salient thing. So I want to encourage people to look at what they're good at and become someone who any organization would want to hire, and then find one of these organizations that's doing work in this area. And you'd be surprised how satisfying and effective that is as a career.
So yeah, so I can absolutely confirm that. I mean, I've only been at OpenAI for 3 weeks, but in that time, I've already had interactions with, and it's a very small team, with the person who runs operations, the person who runs recruiting, and these people are really essential to the organization functioning. And actually, if they've thought about some of these ethical issues, you wouldn't think that it would affect it, but having a larger fraction of the team have kind of, responsible and thoughtful ethical views, it changes the culture of the organization, even when it's not those people's jobs to think about it. It's hard for it not to happen. It happens by osmosis. So having people who are thoughtful in addition to extremely competent at helping out the organization, I feel like these are always positive things.
Okay, so conclusion is be thoughtful and competent. Okay, I think that's all we have time for, but maybe a round of applause for the panel would be great. Let's go.